Somewhere along the coasts of the New World, more than 100 people disappeared. Men, women, and children. Not in a war, not because of a natural disaster, and not a single body was ever found. No distress signal, no explanation. All they left behind was a single word carved into a tree, a word that has puzzled historians for more than 400 years. So how does an entire colony vanish off the face of the earth? Where did its people go? Was it just a human tragedy or one of the greatest unsolved mysteries in history? This is the story of the lost colony of Roanoke. In the late 16th century, Europe was living through the age of exploration. Great powers were competing to control the New World. Ships sailed across oceans in search of wealth, power, and glory. At that time, England was trying to catch up. Spain had already built a vast empire. France was expanding its influence beyond Europe. And the English dreamed of establishing their first permanent colony in the New World. In 1587, a ship set sail carrying a group of English settlers toward the eastern coast of North America. They were not soldiers, nor were they mere adventurers. They were entire families, men, women, and children, all carrying the hope of a new life. There were around 115 of them. They left behind their homeland, their friends, and everything they had ever known, and set off toward an unknown land. A journey that lasted weeks across the ocean. Storms, towering waves, and constant fear that the voyage might end before it even truly began. But in the end, they arrived. Their destination was a small island known as Roanoke. From a distance, it seemed perfect. Dense forests, wide lands, and a strategic location for building a new settlement. But what the settlers did not know was that this island would later become the stage for one of the strangest mysteries in human history. The families began building homes, gathering food, and organizing their new lives. Everyone believed the future was finally here. One woman even gave birth during the settlement's early days, the first English child born in the New World. Her name was Virginia Dare, a symbol of hope and a symbol of a future everyone believed had already begun. But beneath this optimism, problems were quietly growing. Supplies were running low faster than expected. Relations with some local tribes were unstable, and the harsh isolation made survival harder than anyone had imagined. As weeks passed, the settlers faced a frightening truth. If reinforcements did not arrive soon, they might not survive. So the colony's governor made a fateful decision, a decision that would change everything. He would return to England himself to bring back supplies and assistance. He believed he would be gone only a few months and then return to save the colony. But fate had something else in store, something that would turn this small settlement into a mystery that would baffle the world for more than 4 centuries. When John White returned to the island in 1590, he expected to find his children and grandchildren waiting for him. He expected to hear the sound of children among the trees, or to see smoke rising from the chimneys of the houses. But what he found was something entirely different. A heavy, eerie silence that covered the entire place. White and his companions began walking between the wooden houses, but they quickly discovered that the homes were not destroyed. There were no signs of battle, no bodies, and no evidence of a sudden attack. It was far stranger than that. It looked as if the settlers had simply left the settlement and vanished. Then one of the men noticed something carved into a tree trunk, a single word, Croatoan. Everyone gathered around the carving, The word was clear and carefully etched, as if someone had intended to leave a final message before leaving. But what did it mean? The name Croatoan referred to a nearby island inhabited by a local tribe. And here, hope began to return to John White. He had previously agreed with the settlers on something important. If they ever had to leave the colony for any reason, they would leave a message indicating their destination. But there was a problem. If they had been attacked or forced to leave against their will, they were supposed to add a specific symbol to the message, and that symbol was not there, which meant their departure was most likely a choice they made themselves. But if that was the case, where did more than 100 people go? And why was no trace of them ever found again? John White immediately attempted to sail to Croatoan Island. He believed the mystery was about to be solved, but nature had other plans. A powerful storm struck the ships, forcing the crew to turn back. Conditions worsened even further, and White was never able to return to continue the search. And so, a single word carved into a tree became one of the most famous mysteries in history. Just one word, yet it concealed the disappearance of an entire colony. After the disappearance of more than 100 settlers without leaving any trace, questions began to pile up, and as years passed, dozens of theories emerged, attempting to explain what happened at Roanoke. The most logical theory suggests that the settlers did not actually vanish. Instead, they integrated with the local tribes living in the area. The colony was suffering from a severe lack of food and resources, and conditions were worsening day by day. So some historians believe the settlers decided to leave the settlement and join the Croatoan tribe in hopes of survival. There are also accounts that appeared years later, speaking of tribes among whom individuals with European features were seen. Some even reportedly had light-colored eyes, unusual for the region. But the problem is, these accounts were never conclusive evidence. The second theory suggests that the settlers were attacked by hostile tribes. However, this hypothesis faced a major issue. No remains of a battle were ever found. No scattered weapons, no mass graves. It was as if the people had simply left the area peacefully. Then another, more unusual theory emerged. It claims that the colonists attempted to relocate to another area on the mainland, but they encountered famine or disease during the journey and died far from anyone's sight. However, no solid evidence has ever been found to confirm this either. And so, with every new theory that appears, new questions arise alongside it. And instead of the world getting closer to the truth, the mystery only grew deeper. Years passed, then decades, then entire generations. But the name Roanoke never disappeared from historical records. On the contrary, it kept resurfacing every time a new file was opened or an old document was discovered in a forgotten archive. And with every attempt to understand what happened, one truth continued to confront researchers. There is still no final answer to this day. In the 19th century, a renewed interest in the case began to emerge. Archaeologists and historians returned to the original maps drawn by the settlers themselves. These maps contain detailed information about the coastline, the waters, and possible inland routes. But one of these maps sparked major controversy. In a small corner of it, there was a symbol or marking that remained unclear for many years. Some dismissed it as a drawing error. Others believed it was a deliberate clue pointing to a location on the mainland. From there, an old theory was revived that the settlers did not remain on the island, but instead moved inland. However, even this possibility never found definitive proof. No clearly identified villages linked to them, no mass graves, no artifacts that could be conclusively attributed to the colony. As the 20th century arrived, the methods of investigation changed. It was no longer just about excavation or old documents. New technologies were introduced: digital map analysis, terrain comparison, and geographic scanning of areas they were believed to have traveled to. All these studies reopened the question, but still led to no final conclusion. And with every small discovery, another layer of mystery emerged. Some researchers began to propose an entirely different possibility: that the disappearance of Roanoke was not a single event, but a long series of difficult decisions. A small group of people, living in complete isolation, under pressure from hunger, lack of supplies, and uncertainty about any rescue ever arriving. In such conditions, societies do not always collapse suddenly. Sometimes they slowly dissolve. Families separate, settlements shift, and people integrate into new environments without official records or clear traces. But despite this explanation, a critical gap remains. Where is the final evidence? Where is any direct trace linking them to a specific location? Where is any clear record of what actually happened after they left? And here, the case always returns to the same starting point: the tree, the single word. Croatoan, a word so short, yet it has survived more than 400 years of interpretation and speculation, and today, researchers still return to the same fundamental question. Was this word simply a clue pointing to their destination, or was it the final attempt to preserve an unfinished story? And so, the mystery of Roanoke remains unsolved, not only as a historical event, but as one of the most persistent questions in human history. How does more than 100 people disappear without leaving anything behind that could finally close the case? And after more than 4 centuries, the mystery of Roanoke still has no confirmed answer. No graves, no definitive records, no final trace explaining what truly happened. All that remains is a single word carved into a tree: Croatoan. And perhaps we will never know the truth, but some stories do not end because they are solved. They end because they refuse to be forgotten. And if you feel that this mystery is not over yet, then you are in the right place. Subscribe to the channel now, not just to follow the stories, but to become a witness to secrets that were never fully told, because some doors are only opened for those who dare to keep going.